Hey, you. Yeah, I'm talking to you. You, the one that goes on the internet, peruses Reverb looking for a great deal on a vintage guitar so you can sell it and make money. Yeah. Well, this video is for you because today we're going to talk about whether or not that makes any sense. Can you buy a used guitar, vintage guitar, or a new guitar as an investment? I'm going to tell you for real what the answer to that question is, so stay tuned. Hey, you're watching Alamo Music TV. My name is Chris McKee with Alamo Music Center in San Antonio, Texas. You can find us online at alamomusic.com. If you're new to our channel, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications by hitting that bell, and commenting below. We want to hear from you. Like our videos if you like them. Don't click the other button if you don't like them. And if you'd like to support this channel, make sure to visit our Teespring store link below for custom designed t-shirts. We recently reissued the Stranger String shirt. It's been redesigned, so make sure to check that out. That's one of our favorites, which is why I wear it so often. Today, we are talking about guitar valuation. Specifically, a question that came up from one of our viewers, and I think it is an important one, and I happen to have an opinion on the matter. And that is, what guitars will increase in value? And this question comes about because we often want to make sure that when we are spending our hard-earned money, we are going to be making a good investment. We always want a good value, but it's even better if that guitar increases in value. Add to the fact that you can look at a number of vintage guitars, mostly from the 50s, and acoustics is usually Martins that are pre-war in the 30s, and see insane prices for these guitars. And so you have to wonder, what's up with that? How do I get in that game? Can I buy a guitar today that will one day be as valuable as a pre-war Martin? Probably not. In fact, even buying one of those pre-war Martins could be a dicey situation. And so let's have an honest conversation when it comes to guitar values. And to do that, I'm actually holding in my hand a very limited edition Fender guitar that is no longer available. And yet we still have it. That actually kind of speaks to some of the issue. There's nothing wrong with this guitar, by the way. It's very cool. Someone should buy it. It's very light. It's got a beautiful rosewood neck, and it was made a limited number for a limited time, at least. So it should be worth more, right? Not necessarily. It's worth what it's worth. Here's the thing. Let's start at the end, and then we'll qualify it. How much is something worth? It's worth whatever somebody is willing to pay for it. That's the first rule of thumb. If you're like me, if you've ever gone to a guitar show, you know, we will often have a booth when it's not a pandemic at a place like the International Guitar Show in Arlington or Fort Worth or Dallas here in Texas. And the Dallas Guitar Show specifically has a ton of very cool vintage guitars to choose from. And you might peruse by one of those tables and see a 52 Telecaster sitting in the original case with all the documentation with an insane six-figure price tag on it and go, wow, that's amazing. If I could get that guitar and then turn around and sell it for that much money, that would be awesome. But here's the problem. You can't get that guitar for $10,000 anymore because it's sitting on a table with a six-figure price tag on it. And a thing called the internet exists. Not only that, but publications like Vintage Guitar Magazine will actually publish what valuations are going for. And they base those on what people are paying for things. So you'll actually see the price of vintage guitars go up and down over the years. And they're not all created equal. A 52 Tele is going to be more valuable than, say, like an 1800s Martin is going to be. And I kid you not, a 1930s pre-war Martin that's like a D45 is worth a lot more than an older, even more rare nylon string, style for style Martin guitar is going to be. You might be able to buy one of those 1800 Martin guitars for maybe $6,000, $7,000 or even less depending upon the condition for it. But that D45 is going to set you back a very hefty sum. Now, if you look at the world of electric guitars, the same holds true for a 59 Gibson Les Paul. Well, a 70s Les Paul is also vintage, but it's not going to be worth what a 59 Les Paul is. Why does this happen? Well, it happens for a number of reasons. A lot of times it comes down to a few things. One, what is the make? So the brand name. that carries a lot of the weight to start with. A guitar could be amazing, but if no one has ever heard about it, it has no marketability. Now that's true whether it's new, it's used, vintage, it doesn't matter. If a guitar is made by a builder that is maybe one of the very best guitars ever, and maybe it's the only two in existence, but nobody knows about it, then the amount of people that are going to buy that guitar is very, very small. And so because there's not a lot of demand for it, it affects the price. This is basic supply and demand economics. The other part of it too is the model, and then the scarcity of the model and the quality or the perceived quality of that model. So let me give you an example. Fender, good brand. Stratocaster, great guitar, right? 50s Stratocaster, extremely rare, early production, very sought after, vintage for all of those reasons. It's a collector's item, they're great guitars, and there aren't very many of them. 60s prior to CBS, also valuable. After CBS, huge drop-off, and we've talked about that before in videos. Why is there a huge drop-off? Because the perceived value of that guitar is lower than the perceived value of the early 60s guitar because of lower production value. In other words, they had issues with them, they weren't high as production. But if you have that guitar in the hands of Jimi Hendrix, even though it's post-CBS, he's playing it on the stage of Woodstock, now it's worth an astronomical sum. Why? Because that particular guitar with that particular serial number was in the hands of Jimi Hendrix. Now it's valuable not because of the brand name, not because of the model number, and not because of the perceived value or the quality of the build during that particular time, but because a guy named Jimi Hendrix played it. That's what suddenly makes that valuable. He could have been playing some Hofner guitar. It doesn't matter because he was playing it. That's what makes it valuable in that particular thing. So hopefully that frames this situation when it comes to vintage guitars. You should know that vintage guitar valuation, like I said, varies. Back in the 90s, you could go buy a vintage Telecaster or Les Paul or Strat or something for not very much money because they weren't valuable. Okay, there wasn't a lot of value put on them. But as a certain part of our population, namely baby boomers, got older and they wanted these guitars, or the guitars in general just came in vogue again, Stratocasters became popular again, Les Pauls became popular again. These early great examples of these guitars from like the 50s were highly sought after from an aging population that now had the money to buy them, creating less supply with increased demand, driving the costs up, and the general awareness of the population that they were available and in existence. So that's kind of how that works. The internet is a double-edged sword, my friend. It'll tell you about guitars that you should be aware of, but at the same time, it's telling everybody about those guitars. And the cumulative opinion of the internet will, in a way, help determine whether that guitar is worth anything or not. Now let's talk about new guitars. Will new guitars ever reach the astronomical valuations of some of the greatest vintage acoustic and electric guitars that are available today? I don't know. This is a big question mark, but I doubt it, and I'll tell you why. Part of it is scarcity. The guitars that were being produced at this time, back in the 50s, on acoustics back in the 30s, represent a very specific snapshot in time. So let's look at the Martins that are so sought after. They were really, really great guitars in a world that didn't have really, really great guitars. Not only that, but Martin was innovative and really bringing out a lot of new things. And so a lot of those pre-war Martins that were available were just some of the very best acoustic guitars that were around at the time. And there weren't very many of them because the factory only produced a certain amount. There was not the demand that we have today, and there certainly wasn't the supply that we have today. If you look at other examples, like in the 50s, like a 52 Tele, you're literally talking about the genesis of the solid body electric guitar. So just by definition of being at the beginning, there weren't a lot available. And so you have, again, this very limited supply and a very specific time that makes that model of guitar quintessential and highly, highly sought after. Now, they're also very, very good guitars. But here's my problem with looking at it through today's lens. Arguably, the guitars that we have coming out today, in many respects, are better. The technology that we have to build guitars with allows builders to be more consistent in every guitar that they're building. In fact, if you look at early Fenders, for instance, they're all over the place as far as the specs that they have, the colors that were being used, the woods that were being used. Literally, they were using what they had available and changing on the fly, and they weren't doing a NAMM promotion of here is the new spec Telecaster, because people were still going, what's a Telecaster? So you have to understand that there was a lot of experimentation and a lot of development, and so consistency was not something that was there. In fact, that's why there are some good and some not so good used vintage instruments, even of very famous models that we're familiar with. But today we have improved technology that's making very consistent guitars. We have increased population, increased supply chains, more ways of purchasing, and just more guitars available in general. And so what this has done is it has required builders to get a little creative when it comes to building something that's unique, like a limited edition. The most famous guitars that we think of generally are a 52 Tele, not a limited edition 52 Tele, because nothing like that existed at the time. Limited models have come about as a means of basically making something unique in a very crowded market of guitars. If you go to any major guitar retailer's website or any major builder's website, you will see a plethora of models that are available. And I think it is a wonderful thing. I would not want to go back in time to days when there wasn't a lot of selection of guitars and you struggled to find strings and the only ones that were available were black diamond strings. If you like black diamond strings, that's fine. But what I prefer is the amount of selection that we have, the improved building quality, and the benefits that we get when we do have something that's unique like a limited edition, because generally you get a lot of value for your money. This is where value comes back into the equation. Today, adjusted for inflation, which we've talked about on this channel before, guitar values have not really, or I should say new guitar prices have not really gone up. You can roughly buy a guitar today, adjusted for inflation, for about what it cost when it first came out. Even Fender Stratocasters aren't that much more expensive. If you look at like an American professional Strat, it costs about what an American standard cost, 10 years ago. It's a little bit more expensive, but the amount that it's gone up is actually less than inflation. And so we are benefiting from this boom in manufacturing, this availability with marketplaces on the internet, strong dealers who are able to provide us with a lot of options that we haven't had before, and manufacturers who are willing to respond to what the public wants. Does that equate to valuable guitars in the future? I don't think we are going to see any production off-the-shelf Fender Stratocaster turn into a six-figure guitar someday in the future, 80 years from now, unless that guitar had something else that made it unique, like it was owned and played by John Mayer. So I think that's really how it comes down to. So how does that affect you? Here's my advice to you. If you want to get into the used vintage guitar market game in order to purchase and sell guitars to make money, know that it is a very dicey game that you're getting into. It requires a lot of knowledge. You have to be able to spot fakes as well as authentics. You have to know the ins and outs of every particular year. You have to put up with people like Joe Bonamassa, who's going to buy every single 59 Les Paul before you ever get a shot to. But it is a very fun thing to get into and learn all about those models, and occasionally maybe find a great deal on stuff that's available. If you are looking to purchase your new guitar to play as an instrument, hoping that someday it will go up in value, don't do that. Purchase the guitar to enjoy as an instrument on its own. Don't look at its valuation as this thing that exists in this vacuum of whether or not it's a quality guitar. Your guitar may never go up in value to the same extent that a 1930s Martin does. That doesn't mean it's not a good value. It doesn't mean it's not a great instrument, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't buy it. It just simply is what it is, understanding the specifics of what's going on in that market. At the end of the day, these are instruments, and in my opinion, they should be treated as such. Speaking of Joe Bonamassa, love the fact that this guy goes out, nerds out like the rest of us, and finds vintage Fenders and Gibsons and whatnot, and then plays them on stage as they're meant to be played. Because to me, that is the greater journey. So hopefully, as we meandered about quality and maker and just demand and supply and age and all of these things, you begin to develop a clear picture of what's going on in the world of guitars today. As I see it, there were great guitars that were made once upon a time, and we're able to get a hold of those, and they have a special mojo about them. Some of them do, even if their prices are inflated for just a musical instrument. But today, you and I as guitar players have access to amazing instruments at great values that really give us a lot of opportunity. So let's stop worrying about the rest of it. Let's take advantage of what we've got. Let's buy some great guitars and let's make music on them. That's my opinion. Feel free to tell me yours down below in the comments. If you're new to our channel, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, like our videos. We talk about stuff like this because I want to make sure that you are an informed buyer, but at the end of the day, the best guitar in the world isn't necessarily something that was produced twice in the 60s. It's the guitar that you're making music on. I want to help you do that. So if you're shopping for one, go to our website, alamomusic.com. Our associates can chat live with you, help you find that great guitar, and keep coming back to our YouTube channel, watching these videos. I appreciate you for watching this one, and I'll see you next time.